$18.2 billion, with $640 million this year, $1.5 million next year, and it's up to the Chief Constable now to be spending those figures.
We now come to Prime Minister's questions. Daisy Cooper.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the sympathies of everyone in this House will be with those affected by the devastating flooding that we've seen recently. And our thanks goes to all those working tirelessly to support the affected communities. Mr. Speaker, we've committed £2.4 billion over the next 2 years to build, maintain and repair vital defences to protect more communities from the awful impact of the flooding. Mr. Speaker, the ceasefire announced in Lebanon is long overdue, but demonstrates that diplomacy can succeed even in the most challenging of circumstances. We must seize this opportunity to build trust, de-escalate tensions and push for a wider ceasefire. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I associate myself with those remarks of those of the Prime Minister? West Hertfordshire Hospital Trust has eliminated 65-week waits, and they have now met all 3 national cancer standards. These remarkable achievements by the staff are happening despite the fact that they are working in terrible buildings that are life expired and crumbling. If the government is looking for a project that is high-performing and shovel-ready, this is it. So will the Prime Minister give our trust the green light to build a new hospital without any further delay?
I thank her for raising the issue and obviously of importance to her constituents and beyond. Look, the new hospital programme that we inherited was a failure of the previous government. We are committed to delivering. We're reviewing to make sure we can deliver. The Health Secretary set out further details, but I'm very happy for her to have a meeting with the relevant minister if she wants to follow up on the specifics. Thank you.
Chris Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Residents in Red House Park in my constituency are suffering from soaring management fees and poor service from their leaseholder management company. Recent BBC reporting has once again demonstrated the consequences of the outdated and feudal leasehold system. All of them are frustrated by the broken promises of the previous government, so will the Prime Minister reassure them that this government will introduce legislation as soon as possible to resolve the leaseholder and leaseholder crisis?
Mr. Speaker, yes, we will do so. I agree that the last government totally failed to tackle the unfairness of the leasehold system. We will provide homeowners with more powers, protection and greater rights by bringing that legislation forward. Thank you.
Leader of the Opposition, Badenoch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the CBI conference on Monday, the Chancellor said, and I quote, "I'm clear, I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes." I know that telling the truth to this House is important to the Prime Minister. So will he repeat his Chancellor's pledge now?
Mr. Speaker, we set out our position at the budget that was just set out. We're fixing the foundations. We're dealing with the £22 billion black hole that they left. I'm not going to write the next 5 years of budgets here at this dispatch box. But, Mr. Speaker, we said we wouldn't hit the pay slips of working people. We passed the budget, we invest in the future, and we kept that promise.
Mr. Speaker, he's not fixing any foundations, he's making everything worse. The whole House would have heard him refuse to repeat the Chancellor's pledge, a pledge as worthless as the manifesto promises that he's talking about. If he is fixing foundations, why is it that the PMI index shows that business confidence has crashed since the budget?
Mr. Speaker, we're fixing the foundation. We've got record investment into this country. But she talks about tax rises. Mr. Speaker, 2 weeks ago, she stood there and said that she wanted all the investment, all the benefits of the budget, but she didn't know how she was going to pay for it. I noticed that, having come here criticising the national insurance rises over and over again, on Monday she admitted that she wouldn't reverse the position that we set out. Meanwhile, her science minister was saying he was going energetically to do the opposite. They really haven't got a clue what they're doing.
Mr. Speaker, if he wants to know what Conservatives would do, he should resign and find out. Until then...
I'll decide when there's more.
Mr. Speaker, until then, I'm the one asking the questions. There's a petition out there, 2 million people asking him to go. He's the one who doesn't know. He's the one who doesn't know how things work. It is not government that creates growth, Mr. Speaker. It is business. His employment secretary, I don't see her here, she wants more young people in work. But businesses say they are cutting jobs because of the Chancellor's budget. His Deputy Prime Minister, she is not here. Her employment rights bill will stop businesses hiring. That's what they say. The CBI said on Monday that the dots of the government's policy don't join up. They're right, aren't they?
Mr. Speaker, on Monday she said that she wouldn't reverse the increase in national insurance. Yesterday, on their legacy legislation, their predecessor, they couldn't decide what their position was. Today, they've launched a policy commission asking other people to give them some ideas for government. And she talks about a petition. We had a massive petition on the 4th of July in this country. We spent years taking our party from a party of protest to a party of government. They're hurtling in the opposite direction.
What a load of nonsense, Mr. Speaker. We had a budget in March this year, and tractors were not blockading the streets of Whitehall afterwards. So let me give him another example of a real business. Following his budget, the head of McVitie's has said that it has been harder to understand what the case for investment in the UK is. So while the Prime Minister has been hobnobbing in Brazil, businesses have been struggling to digest his budget. Isn't it the case, Mr. Speaker, that the Employment Rights Bill shows that it is not only the ginger nut that is causing him problems?
I was attending the G20. I suspect on their current trajectory they don't know whether they're going to attend the G20 or not. Maybe the Policy Commission will come up with an answer on that one. But we've had record investment from overseas into this country. And she keeps carping from the sidelines. She says at this dispatch book, she wants all the benefits of the budget, all the investment, but she doesn't want to pay for any of it. Mr. Speaker, she's racked up £6.7 billion of unfunded commitments in just 3 weeks as leader of the opposition. So once it comes to the economy, we're the ones growing the economy.
Mr. Speaker, the investment he's taking credit for was our work. I was business secretary. We negotiated those deals that he announced. But the bottom line is that in all that he has said, he doesn't seem to care about the young people who will lose their jobs as a result of his budget. Perhaps he can show more concern for the 1,100 people who found out yesterday that they could lose their jobs at Vauxhall's plant in Luton. So while he flies around making unilateral commitments, back home, the real-world effects are businesses closing in Bedfordshire and Basildon. Does the Prime Minister stand by his promise to ban the sale of petrol cars by 2030, even if more jobs will be lost?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't normally invite a heckle, but that one was accurate. Mr. Speaker, the question of the position of jobs in Luton is a very serious one, and families and workers will be very worried, and we are obviously engaging with them. I would remind the Leader of the Opposition that the EV mandates that are an issue in this particular case were actually introduced by the last government. I would also remind her that she was the business secretary that introduced them. We're getting on with supporting those communities. She's shouting from the sidelines.
Mr. Speaker, he clearly didn't read his briefing about the EV mandate. The fact is, we changed the date and made it easier for people. Everything he has done is attack people. The budget was an attack on farmers, an attack on workers, an attack on pensioners, an attack on the young, and an attack on thousands of charities and businesses across the country. The whole system is broken, Mr. Speaker, and he is making things worse. He is making things worse.
Affected.
Mr. Speaker, he is making things worse. Everyone is unhappy. Isn't it a good thing that the Chancellor is an expert at customer complaints?
Mr. Speaker, I think she's just read out the charge sheet against the last government. Everything is broken. And they come here every week with absolutely nothing to offer except complaints. Nothing constructive, no new ideas. They don't know what they're doing from one day to the next. Living in this fantasy world that everything was fine, apparently, for 14 years. Well, the country's fed up with those fantasies. They've got rid of those fantasies. We're going to take the hard decisions. They're jumping on every bandwagon that's passing. We're taking the country forward.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we enter the last week of Islamophobia Awareness Month, the Prime Minister will know that this year has been an extraordinarily difficult for British Muslims on the receiving end of society's most deplorable attitudes, considered easy prey for the far right and scapegoated by politicians endorsing institutional Islamophobia. And the reality is this emboldening and normalisation of Islamophobia, as highlighted in a number of reports, led to the race riots we saw on the streets of Britain this summer, where mosques and those who are visibly Muslim were subject to despicable attacks, with many left fearing for their lives. So will the Prime Minister condemn those in public office and positions of power who actively promote Islamophobia? Will he commit to adopting a definition today? And will he further outline what concrete steps the government is taking to rip out Islamophobia at its roots, including in this place?
Mr. Speaker, he's right to raise Islamophobia, and there's been a concerning rise in Islamophobia and anti-Semitism over recent months, and we are committed to tackling all forms of hatred, and we will work with others on an ongoing basis to make sure that we do. Thank you.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Red Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's remarks about the terrible impact of Storm Bert with all the flooding? Our thoughts are with all those affected, with thanks to our amazing emergency services. Mr. Speaker, Christine's father was told that he needed end-of-life care, but after a few days it was removed due to funding cuts. He was told that he wouldn't get it, and he died a few weeks later in excruciating pain. Christine said it was terrible to watch him suffer. Does the Prime Minister agree that whatever the House decides on Friday, it is urgent to improve access to high-quality end-of-life care? And will he make that a key focus of the 10-year NHS plan? And will he commit now to protect hospices from the national insurance rise?
I thank you for raising that case, and I think the thoughts of the whole House with the family involved. And, Mr. Speaker, obviously there's a very important vote on Friday, but whichever way that vote goes, we must invest properly in care across our health service, and that's why, in addition to putting the NHS back on its feet, we're putting forward a 10-year plan to make sure the NHS can give the care that everybody would expect across the spectrum, including end-of-life care.
So, Ed David.
Can I thank the Prime Minister for that reply, and I hope we'll hear more from ministers, particularly on hospices and national insurance, in days to come. Turning to the cost of living crisis, on Friday, Ofgem said that in January, energy bills would go up again after last month's 10% rise. Millions of people are really worried about how they're going to make ends meet this winter, not least hundreds of thousands of pensioners who are in poverty but above the pension credit limit, who will now lose winter fuel payments. So with energy bills going up again, will the Prime Minister reconsider and restore winter fuel payments?
Well, Mr. Speaker, obviously the whole House is concerned about energy bills, which are actually lower this year than they